My wealthy grandmother found me and my 6-year-old daughter standing outside a family shelter and asked why I wasn't living in my house on Silver Oak Lane. I stared at her, completely confused. What house? 3 days later, I walked into a family event, and my parents went pale. If you've never tried getting a 6-year-old ready for school while living in a family shelter, I can explain it like this. It feels like balancing an entire life before sunrise while pretending nothing is wrong. That morning, the problem was a sock. "Mom," my daughter whispered gently like she was protecting me, "it's okay. They don't have to match." I looked down at her feet. One lavender sock covered in tiny stars, one faded white sock that had clearly survived too many washes. I stared longer than necessary because focusing on socks was easier than looking at the building behind us. Bright Harbor Family Shelter, 6:07 a.m. The sky was pale gray, and the cold air carried the sharp smell of rain-soaked pavement. Families moved quietly around us, parents gripping coffee cups, children adjusting backpacks, everyone pretending this stop in life was temporary. "That's very confident fashion," I said, forcing a smile. My daughter, Ava, grinned proudly. Her backpack looked too big for her small frame, but she carried it seriously, like responsibility itself. For a moment, I almost forgot where we were. Then the shelter doors opened again, releasing the familiar scent of disinfectant, and reality returned all at once. I zipped her coat higher. "Bus comes in 5 minutes," I said. She nodded, then hesitated. "Do I still have to say our address if Mrs. Carter asks?" My stomach tightened instantly. "I don't think she will today," I answered softly. It wasn't a real answer, and she knew it. Kids always know when adults are building comfort out of half-truths. She studied my face carefully. "Are we moving again?" I opened my mouth and nothing came out, because I didn't know. 3 weeks earlier, we had still been living with my parents. 3 weeks earlier, I believed asking family for help meant safety. Now the word family felt like paperwork instead of comfort. Across the street, parents loaded children into warm cars. Engines hummed. Normal mornings continued without noticing us standing near the curb. Ava tugged my sleeve again. "When we get a house," she said confidently, "can my room be yellow?" Not if. When. The certainty nearly broke me. "Yeah," I whispered. "Yellow sounds perfect." The school bus appeared around the corner, flashing lights cutting through the gray morning. Ava waved before it even stopped. She always trusted the world faster than I did. As she climbed aboard, she turned back. "Love you." "Love you more," I called. The doors folded shut and the bus pulled away, taking the strongest part of me with it. Silence followed. My shoulders dropped now that I didn't have to pretend strength. My phone buzzed. Another overdue notification I couldn't solve yet. 6 months ago, I was working steady shifts at Riverside General Hospital, saving carefully, believing effort guaranteed stability. Turns out stability disappears quietly. I turned toward the shelter entrance, already planning the next step. Another housing application, another shift request, another explanation I didn't want to give. That's when a black sedan rolled slowly to the curb. It didn't belong here. Not a taxi, not a rideshare. The kind of car that arrived in neighborhoods where problems were solved privately. The engine stopped. The back door opened. And my past stepped onto the sidewalk. Elegant coat. Perfect posture. The kind of presence that made people instinctively move aside. Eleanor Whitaker. My grandmother. The last person who was supposed to see me like this. Her eyes found mine instantly. Recognition first, then confusion, then something sharper when she noticed the shelter sign behind me. "Naomi," she said. Hearing my name in her voice felt unreal, like stepping into another life. "What are you doing here?" My instinct answered before honesty could. "I'm fine," I said quickly. "It's temporary." Her gaze moved briefly. My worn shoes, my shaking hands, the building behind me, then returned to my face. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Naomi," she said carefully, "why aren't you living in your house on Silver Oak Lane?" The world tilted. "My what?" I laughed nervously. "I don't have a house." Something changed in her expression. Not surprise, but realization. A puzzle piece sliding into place. She opened the car door. "Get in," she said gently. I hesitated, glancing once more at the shelter behind me. Sometimes the moment that changes everything looks ordinary at first. Just another morning people walk past without noticing. And sometimes, hearing how a story truly begins matters more than people realize, because someone else might be standing at the same starting point without knowing it yet. I didn't understand what was happening, but for the first time in weeks, something inside me shifted. Hope, small, cautious, but real, and without fully knowing why, I stepped into the car. My what? The question slipped out before I could stop it. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitaker, didn't answer immediately. She studied my face carefully, the way she used to when I was a teenager trying to pretend everything was fine after a bad day. Except this time, I truly had no idea what she meant. "The house," she repeated calmly, "on Silver Oak Lane." I shook my head, confused laughter escaping me. "I think you're mistaken," I said. "I don't own a house." The morning noise around us faded into the background. Cars passed. Someone laughed somewhere down the street. But everything sounded distant, like I was underwater. Eleanor glanced once more at the shelter sign, then back at me. "When did you move out?" she asked. "Move out of where?" "The property." "I told you," I said quietly, embarrassment creeping into my voice. "I don't have one." A long silence followed. Then she nodded slowly. Not as if she believed me, but as if something finally made sense in a way she didn't like. "Get in the car, Naomi." Her tone was gentle but firm. I hesitated. Accepting help felt dangerous after weeks of feeling like a burden everywhere I went. My mother's voice echoed faintly in my head. "Don't drag your grandmother into problems. She hates drama." But the shelter doors behind me felt heavier than pride. I slid into the back seat. The leather felt impossibly soft compared to thin mattresses and plastic chairs. The door shut quietly, sealing out the cold air and the sounds of the street. Eleanor didn't start the engine right away. "For now," she said, "you're going to tell me exactly what happened." Something in her voice made pretending impossible. So I told her about rent rising beyond what I could manage alone, about moving into my parents' home temporarily, about working extra shifts at Riverside General Hospital, while trying to save enough for a new place. At first I avoided the painful details, the comments, the tension, the slow feeling of becoming unwelcome. Eleanor listened without interrupting. "And now you're living in a shelter," she said quietly when I finished. "Yes." Her fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Then she reached for her phone. "Marcus," she said when the call connected, "I need the property manager for Silver Oak Lane immediately." My stomach tightened. "Property manager? This is Eleanor Whitaker," she continued calmly. "I want confirmation of occupancy, key authorization records, and payment history." Payment history. The words landed heavily. She ended the call and turned toward me. "When was the last time you spoke to your parents?" "A couple weeks ago," I admitted. "They said they needed space." Her expression sharpened, though her voice stayed controlled. The phone rang again only minutes later. She placed it on speaker. "Yes?" A hesitant male voice answered. "Ms. Whitaker, the Silver Oak Lane property is currently occupied." My heart skipped. "Occupied? Who authorized access?" she asked. "Keys were signed out by Daniel and Laura Hayes last July." My parents. The air left my lungs. "And rent payments?" she continued. A pause. "They've been receiving monthly transfers through an account registered under their names." The world tilted. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, then thanked the caller and ended the conversation. Neither of us spoke. "They rented it," I whispered. Her voice softened, but every word was precise. "Naomi, I purchased that home for you and Ava." My mind refused to process the sentence. "I trusted your parents to arrange the transfer," she continued. "They assured me you had already moved in." Memories rushed back. My mother insisting Eleanor was traveling overseas, too busy to be contacted. My father changing the subject whenever housing came up. "They knew," I said slowly. Eleanor met my eyes. "Yes." While Ava and I searched apartment listings, while we slept in a car, while I filled out shelter paperwork, my parents had been collecting rent from a house meant for us. Tears blurred my vision, but anger followed quickly behind them, stronger than shame. Eleanor started the engine. "We're going to Silver Oak Lane," she said. My pulse quickened. "Why?" "So you can see it yourself." The car pulled into traffic, leaving the shelter behind. Outside the window, the city moved normally, unaware that everything I believed about my family had just shattered. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I realized something terrifying and freeing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had taken our future and called it help. The drive to Silver Oak Lane felt unreal. I sat quietly in the back seat while the city slowly changed outside the window. Busy intersections faded into quieter streets, lined with tall trees and wide sidewalks. Lawns were trimmed neatly. Mailboxes stood straight. Everything looked stable. The kind of neighborhood where people planned birthdays months ahead instead of worrying about where they would sleep that night. My chest tightened. I used to pass neighborhoods like this after late hospital shifts, imagining Ava riding a bike down one of these streets, imagining what normal life might feel like again. Eleanor slowed the car. "We're almost there," she said gently. My hands began to shake before I understood why. The sedan turned onto a peaceful street framed by silver oak trees, stretching across the road like an archway. Children's chalk drawings colored the sidewalks. A dog barked happily somewhere nearby. Wind chimes moved softly on a porch. Then the car stopped. "That's it," Eleanor said. I followed her gaze. A white two-story house stood across the street, sunlight catching wide front windows and pale blue shutters. A porch swing moved slowly in the breeze. Flower beds bordered the walkway, carefully maintained even this late in the season. It looked warm, lived in, loved. "That's the house?" I asked quietly. "Yes." For a moment, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. A dark SUV sat in the driveway. Bright plastic toys were scattered across the lawn. Someone else lived here. The front door opened. A woman stepped outside carrying a laundry basket. Behind her, a young boy ran onto the porch, chasing a golden retriever, both laughing loudly. The sound hit me harder than anything else. That should have been Ava. I didn't realize tears were falling until my vision blurred. "They are tenants," Eleanor said softly beside me. "They are not responsible for this." Tenants. The word felt sharp, meaning contracts existed, decisions had been made, money exchanged, all without me even knowing the house existed. I stepped out of the car slowly, legs unsteady. The woman noticed us and approached politely, though cautiously. "Hi," she said, "can I help you?" Eleanor offered a calm, reassuring smile. "Good afternoon. I'm Eleanor Whitaker. I believe there may be some confusion regarding this property." The woman frowned slightly but remained kind. "We rent through a management company," she explained. "Is something wrong?" "No," Eleanor said gently. "Not for you. May I ask when your lease began?" "August," she replied. "We moved in late August." August. My stomach dropped. That was weeks before my parents told me I needed to leave their home, before the boxes in the hallway, before the shelter. They had already rented it. Eleanor thanked her politely and returned to the car without creating a scene. I followed, numb. The moment the door closed behind me, something inside me broke open. "They knew," I whispered. "They knew we had nowhere to go." Eleanor didn't interrupt. "They watched us struggle," I continued, voice shaking. "They let Ava sleep in a car while they collected rent." Saying it aloud made the truth impossible to soften. For weeks I had blamed myself. For not earning enough, not planning better, not being strong enough. Now I understood. This wasn't failure. It was betrayal. Eleanor's voice softened. "You were never meant to carry that alone, Naomi." Outside, the little boy chased his dog across the yard, laughter echoing freely. The image burned into my memory. A childhood that should have belonged to my daughter. Something shifted inside me. The shame I had carried since the shelter began to crack, replaced by anger, steady and clear. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Eleanor started the engine. "Your parents are hosting a family dinner in 3 days," she said. My stomach tightened instantly. "Yes," she continued calmly, "and we will attend." The certainty in her voice sent a chill through me. "They believe their story is safe," she added. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the house behind, for now. I watched it disappear in the rearview mirror, realizing something important. That house had never truly been lost. It had been taken. And once you see the life that should have been yours, pretending nothing happened is no longer possible. We drove away from Silver Oak Lane in silence. The image of the house stayed with me. The porch swing moving gently, the laughter of strangers living inside a life meant for Ava and me. Every memory from the past few months began rearranging itself into something clearer, something harder to ignore. Eleanor finally spoke. "I need you to tell me everything," she said. "Start from the beginning." So I did. 6 months earlier, life had still felt manageable. Not easy, but stable enough. I worked long shifts at Riverside General Hospital, sometimes 12 hours at a time, coming home exhausted but proud that Ava and I were moving forward. Then rent increased. Not gradually, suddenly, sharply, enough to erase every careful budget I had built. I remember sitting at my kitchen table late at night, calculator glowing on my phone, trying again and again to make the numbers work. They never did. The next morning, my mother called. "You and Ava should stay with us for a while," Laura said warmly. "Just until you get back on your feet. Family helps family." I wanted to believe her. At first, it almost felt comforting. Ava slept in my old bedroom. My father helped her with homework. My mother cooked dinner and told relatives how proud she was that I worked so hard. But kindness changed slowly. Small comments appeared first. "You're always tired," my mother would say lightly. "Maybe you should organize your life better." My father sighed whenever Ava's toys were left in the living room. "We just like things neat." I worked more hours, trying to take up less space. I paid for groceries even when it left my account nearly empty. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Then came the night everything ended. I returned home after a double shift, feet aching, mind numb. The hallway light outside my parents' apartment was on. 2 cardboard boxes sat by the door. My boxes. For a moment, I thought they belonged to someone else. Then I saw Ava's stuffed rabbit resting on top. My hands went cold. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked harder. Finally, the door opened just enough for my mother's face to appear. "You need to keep your voice down," she whispered sharply. "The neighbors." "Why are my things outside?" I asked. My father's voice came from behind her. "We talked about independence." "It hasn't been 30 days, I said, panic rising. Her expression barely changed. "Plans change." I looked past her shoulder and saw Ava curled near the shoe rack, half asleep, still wearing her jacket like she had been waiting for me. They had already packed us. Already decided. "Where are we supposed to go?" I whispered. My mother smiled faintly. "You'll figure it out. You always do." The door began to close. I stepped inside just long enough to lift Ava into my arms. She wrapped around my neck automatically. "Mom," she murmured sleepily. "It's okay," I lied softly. "We're having an adventure tonight." The lock clicked behind us. That sound followed me for weeks. I loaded the car quietly while Ava slept in the back seat. Streetlights blurred past as I drove without direction, asking myself the same question again and again. How did this happen? Now, sitting beside Eleanor, I finally understood. Nothing about that night had been sudden. "They removed you after securing income from your home," Eleanor said quietly when I finished. Hearing it spoken plainly made my chest ache. "Yes," I whispered. She stared out the window for a long moment, her calm expression hiding anger far colder than shouting. "In 3 days," she said finally, "they will answer for this." I leaned back against the seat, exhausted but lighter. For months I had questioned myself, my choices, my strength, my worth. Now the truth felt undeniable. The problem had never been that I failed. The problem was that I trusted the wrong people. Outside, city lights flickered on as evening settled, and for the first time since the hallway door closed behind me, I felt something unfamiliar returning. Not hope exactly, something steadier. The quiet certainty that the story wasn't ending where I thought it had. It was only beginning to reveal the truth. We didn't return to the shelter that night. I realized it when Eleanor drove past the familiar exit without slowing down. For a moment, I thought she had simply missed the turn. But Eleanor Whitaker was not someone who made accidental decisions. "Where are we going?" I asked quietly. "Somewhere you can rest," she replied. The word rest felt unfamiliar. For weeks, rest had meant sleeping lightly, listening for footsteps, always prepared to move again. The car moved through downtown traffic before pulling beneath the covered entrance of a quiet hotel, glowing with warm light. A valet approached immediately, greeting Eleanor by name. I hesitated before stepping out. "We don't need something like this," I said softly. Eleanor looked at me with calm certainty. "Yes," she said, "you do. Inside, warmth wrapped around me instantly. The air smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood instead of disinfectant. No one stared, no one asked questions. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I had to explain why I existed there. Within minutes, a key card rested in my hand. Room 1412. The elevator ride felt unreal. I watched the numbers climb while my reflection stared back at me. Tired eyes, guarded posture, someone who had spent too long expecting rejection. The room door opened to sunlight and quiet. A wide bed with clean white sheets, a couch near the window overlooking the city. Silence that didn't feel lonely. I stepped inside slowly, almost afraid the moment would disappear. "You'll stay here for now," Eleanor said, "as long as necessary." Emotion rose unexpectedly in my chest. "I don't know how to thank you," I whispered. She shook her head gently. "This isn't charity, Naomi. This is correction." "Correction!" The words settled deeply. Ava arrived an hour later after Eleanor arranged early pickup from school. The moment she entered the room, her eyes widened. "Is this ours?" she asked, spinning once. "For a little while," I said. She jumped onto the bed, laughing. Real laughter, loud and free. Within minutes, she was inspecting tiny shampoo bottles like priceless treasures. "This soap smells important," she declared seriously. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. That evening, papers covered the small table. Lease records, payment transfers, printed emails. Reality organized neatly into evidence. "The tenants are not responsible," Eleanor explained. "They signed legally. Responsibility rests entirely with your parents." I nodded slowly. "They redirected rental payments monthly," she continued, "consistently." "How long?" I asked. "Since August." Before we were locked out. The timeline felt heavier every time I heard it. Eleanor studied me carefully. "You are not required to attend the dinner," she said. "I can resolve this legally without involving you." Part of me wanted to disappear from confrontation completely, avoid their faces, avoid hearing excuses disguised as concern. But another part remembered Ava asking when we would have a home again. "If I don't go," I said quietly. "They'll keep pretending nothing happened." Eleanor nodded once. "Then we go together." Later that night, Ava fell asleep quickly, curled beneath clean blankets. I sat by the window watching city lights flicker on one by one. My phone buzzed occasionally. Work notifications, unpaid bills, reminders of responsibilities still waiting. But for the first time, they didn't feel overwhelming. Sometimes, when life slows down long enough, you realize how powerful it is simply to hear someone speak honestly about what they've survived. Stories have a way of reminding people they're not alone, even when they feel invisible. I found myself thinking how many others might understand this moment more than they expected. Behind me, Eleanor closed her laptop. "It's arranged," she said. "What is?" "The first step." I nodded, heart steady but nervous. 3 days. 3 days until I faced the people who had convinced me my failure was inevitable. I looked around the quiet room again. Ava sleeping peacefully, the absence of fear, the unfamiliar feeling of safety. For the first time since the hallway door closed behind us, I allowed myself to breathe fully. And I realized something important. Sometimes life doesn't change because everything is fixed. Sometimes it changes because someone finally gives you enough space to stand again. The first morning in the hotel felt unfamiliar in a way I didn't know how to explain. I woke before sunrise out of habit, expecting noise. Doors opening, footsteps in hallways, voices echoing through thin shelter walls. Instead, there was only quiet. Real quiet. For a few seconds, I lay still, unsure why my chest didn't feel tight. Then Ava climbed onto the bed beside me, hair tangled from sleep. "Mom," she whispered excitedly, "the shower makes rain sounds." I laughed softly before I could stop myself. "That sounds very fancy." She nodded seriously. "Fancy water means we're safe." Kids understood things, adults complicated. While Ava watched cartoons, I opened my laptop and checked messages from Riverside General Hospital. My supervisor had sent a short email. "Take the time you need. Your position is secure." I stared at the words longer than necessary. For months, I had lived with the quiet fear that everything could disappear at once. Housing, work, stability. Seeing reassurance instead of pressure almost felt unreal. A knock sounded at the door. Eleanor entered carrying coffee and a paper bag filled with pastries. "Breakfast," she announced simply. Ava ran over immediately, declaring Eleanor officially the best grandma, then launched into a detailed explanation about cartoon dragons. Eleanor listened patiently, her serious expression softening in ways I rarely saw growing up. Watching them together felt strange. My grandmother had always seemed distant when I was young. Composed, powerful, intimidating. Now I saw something else beneath that control: regret. Later that afternoon, documents spread across the small table again. Eleanor reviewed them carefully. "The financial trail is clear," she said. "Lease authorization, rental agreements, bank transfers. There will be no confusion." I nodded slowly. Seeing betrayal written in contracts hurt more than hearing it spoken aloud. Paper didn't allow excuses. "You still have a choice," she added gently. "You do not have to attend the dinner." I considered it. The idea of walking into a room filled with relatives, people who believed whatever story my parents had told, made my stomach tighten. But avoiding it felt worse. "If I don't go," I said quietly, "they'll keep rewriting what happened." Eleanor met my eyes. "Yes," she said, "they will." That evening, she suggested we go for a walk. Fresh air felt different after weeks of survival mode. We walked through a nearby park while the sun lowered behind buildings, painting the sky gold and orange. Ava ran ahead chasing pigeons, laughter echoing across open space. I watched her carefully. For the first time in months, she looked like a child again instead of someone trying to stay brave for me. "Fear changes posture," Eleanor said beside me. I glanced at her. "You've spent months apologizing for existing," she continued gently. "You don't need to do that anymore." I hadn't realized how true that was until she said it. I had learned to shrink. Softer voice, smaller presence, constant gratitude simply for being tolerated. "What if I freeze?" I admitted quietly. "At the dinner. Then I speak," she said calmly. "And if they deny everything?" "They will." Her certainty startled me. What if people believe them? Eleanor stopped walking and turned toward me. "Truth does not depend on approval," she said, "only clarity." Ava ran back toward us, breathless. "When we move into our house," she said confidently, "can Grandma come every Sunday?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "I would like that very much." We returned to the hotel under glowing streetlights. That night, after Ava fell asleep, I stood in front of the mirror studying myself. Same face, but something had changed. The exhaustion was still there, but beneath it was strength slowly returning. Quiet, steady, undeniable. 3 days earlier, I had stood outside a shelter trying not to cry. Now I was preparing to walk into a room where the truth would finally be spoken aloud. And I realized the confrontation wasn't only about reclaiming a house. It was about reclaiming the version of myself I almost forgot existed. The morning of the dinner arrived faster than I expected. I woke before the alarm, staring at the ceiling while pale light slipped through the hotel curtains. My stomach felt tight, not exactly fear, but anticipation. The kind that comes when something unavoidable waits at the end of the day. For weeks, I had imagined seeing my parents again. In every version, I was angry, shaking, ready to defend myself. Instead, I felt calm. Ava sat cross-legged on the bed, brushing her doll's hair with intense concentration while I dressed. "Are we going somewhere important?" she asked. "Yes," I said, smoothing the front of the simple navy dress Eleanor had insisted I buy. "But you won't stay for the grown-up part." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because sometimes adults forget how to behave," I said gently. She accepted that explanation immediately. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, elegant as always. She carried a small box wrapped in pale yellow paper and handed it to Ava. Inside was a dress, soft fabric the color of sunlight. Ava gasped. "I look like a princess." "You look confident," Eleanor corrected warmly. Watching Ava spin happily across the room eased the tension building in my chest. The car ride downtown passed mostly in silence. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, turning city lights into blurred reflections. "What if they act like nothing happened?" I asked quietly. "They will," Eleanor said. "What if I lose my nerve?" She glanced at me briefly. "You already endured the hardest part," she said. "Tonight is simply truth arriving." The venue appeared ahead, a large hotel glowing warmly against the gray evening sky. Valets moved quickly beneath the covered entrance, while guests laughed and greeted one another inside. A sign near the doors read, "Hayes Family Dinner." Of course it did. My mother loved events, not because she loved gatherings, but because she loved appearances. Before we entered, Eleanor spoke quietly with a staff member. A small private room nearby was opened, stocked with water and snacks. "This is for Ava," she said. "She doesn't need to hear adult conversations." Ava inspected the snack table seriously. "Unlimited crackers?" "Yes." Satisfied, she waved goodbye while an assistant stayed with her. I took a slow breath. Then Eleanor surprised me. "You go in first." My heart skipped. "Alone?" "Yes." I understood immediately. Let them see me before they saw her. Let uncertainty grow. I pushed open the banquet doors. Warm light spilled across the room. Conversations blended together. Laughter, clinking glasses, polite greetings. For a moment, no one noticed me. Then my aunt turned. Her smile froze. Whispers spread quietly from table to table. I felt eyes settle on me, curious, confused, cautious. At the far end of the room stood my parents. My mother held a wine glass mid-conversation. Her expression shifted instantly when recognition hit. Surprise flickered first, followed by calculation. She hadn't expected me to look steady. My father noticed seconds later. His shoulders stiffened, jaw tightening as he tried to understand why I was there. Neither of them rushed toward me. They didn't ask where I had been. They simply watched. I stood near the entrance, letting silence stretch. The old version of me would have hurried forward, apologizing for tension I didn't create. This time I stayed still. Eventually, my mother approached, smile carefully reconstructed. "Naomi," she said brightly, loud enough for others to hear. "We were wondering where you disappeared to." As if weeks of silence had been casual. "I've been busy," I replied calmly. Her eyes searched my face, trying to understand what had changed. "Well," she laughed lightly, "you look better." Before I could respond, the atmosphere shifted. The doors behind me opened again. Conversation slowed, then stopped entirely. Eleanor Whitaker entered the room, and suddenly everyone understood this dinner was no longer just a celebration. It was the beginning of something none of them were prepared for. The moment Eleanor Whitaker entered the banquet hall, the atmosphere changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic at first. No raised voices, no sudden confrontation, just a subtle shift. Conversations lowering, people turning instinctively toward her as if sensing something important had arrived. Eleanor moved calmly through the room, offering polite nods to relatives who greeted her with uncertain smiles. Behind her walked a man carrying a slim laptop bag and a folder tucked neatly beneath his arm. My mother noticed him immediately. Her smile faltered. "Mom," she said quickly, forcing warmth into her voice. "What a surprise. You didn't say you were coming tonight." Eleanor's expression remained pleasant. "I thought I would join," she replied lightly. "Family gatherings matter." My father stepped closer beside her, posture stiff. "We were just about to begin dinner," he said carefully. "Maybe we can talk later." "Oh, we will," Eleanor answered calmly. Her tone stayed gentle but final. Guests exchanged curious glances. Waiters slowed near the walls. The hum of conversation faded into uneasy silence. Eleanor turned slightly toward the room. "Before everyone sits," she said politely, "there's a small matter I'd like to clarify." My mother laughed too quickly. "Mom, tonight really isn't the time." Eleanor raised one hand. Not sharply, just enough. The room fell completely quiet. The man beside her stepped forward and connected his laptop to the projector near the stage. A soft mechanical hum filled the air as the screen flickered to life. Confusion spread across the crowd. My heartbeat pounded loudly in my ears. The first slide appeared. Silver Oak Lane, property summary. Whispers rippled through the room. My mother's face drained of color. "Mom," she whispered. Eleanor spoke calmly as if presenting routine information. "This property," she began, "was purchased for my granddaughter Naomi and my great-granddaughter Ava." A murmur moved across the tables. The next slide appeared. Key transfer authorization, signed Laura Hayes. Gasps sounded quietly. My mother forced a laugh. "Well, yes," she said quickly. "Naomi asked us to help with paperwork." Eleanor didn't interrupt. She simply nodded to the man operating the laptop. The next slide appeared. Photographs from a rental listing. bright staged rooms. The house presented as a furnished rental. Below it read, "Listing activated. August." The whispers grew louder. My father stepped forward sharply. "This is inappropriate," he said. "This is a private family matter." Eleanor turned her gaze toward him. "Yes," she said evenly, "which is why it is being addressed honestly." Another slide appeared. Lease documents. Move-in date, August. The exact month Ava and I were still living in their home. Then came the final page. Bank transfer records. Monthly rent payments directed into accounts registered to Laura and Daniel Hayes. The room went completely still. Even the air felt heavier. Eleanor's voice remained calm. "You did not simply delay informing Naomi," she said. "You rented out the home intended for her and her child and collected the income yourselves." My mother's composure broke. "We had debts," she cried suddenly. "You don't understand what we were dealing with." My father added quickly, "We were going to tell her. It was temporary." Eleanor's eyes shifted briefly toward the hallway where Ava waited safely away from the scene. "You displaced a child," she said quietly. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. "For profit." Someone gasped aloud. Chairs shifted. Relatives exchanged stunned looks. My mother began crying openly. "You're humiliating us," she whispered. Eleanor shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "Your actions did that." She nodded once more. The man beside her stepped forward, handing documents to my parents. "Formal notices regarding financial recovery and legal proceedings," he said politely. Near the entrance, a uniformed officer stood quietly. Not threatening, simply present. My father's confidence collapsed. This was no longer an argument. It was consequence. My mother turned toward me desperately. "Naomi," she pleaded, "tell her this isn't necessary. We're family." For a moment, old instincts stirred. The urge to soften things, to make peace. Then I remembered Ava asleep in the back seat of my car. "You should have remembered that," I said quietly, "before you turned my daughter's home into income." Silence followed. The illusion of a perfect family dinner dissolved completely, and for the first time since everything began, the truth stood alone in the center of the room. Undeniable and impossible to ignore. The silence after the documents were handed over felt heavier than the confrontation itself. No one moved at first. Conversations that had filled the room only minutes earlier vanished completely, replaced by the uncomfortable awareness that something permanent had just happened. My father stared at the papers in his hands as if refusing to understand them might somehow undo everything. "This didn't have to happen like this," he muttered weakly. "We could have talked privately." Eleanor's reply was calm. "You had months to do that." My mother's crying grew louder, uneven and desperate now. "We were going to fix it," she insisted, looking around the room for sympathy. "It was temporary." The word echoed painfully. Temporary was what they called my stay in their home. Temporary was what I told Ava every night when we didn't know where we would sleep next. But temporary had never applied to the rent payments they collected. Relatives shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided eye contact, others watched openly, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Quiet whispers spread as people began piecing together the truth behind months of polite family stories. My aunt approached cautiously. "Naomi, we didn't know," she said softly. I nodded. I believed her. Most of them had only seen the version of events my parents allowed. That was the hardest part of betrayal. It often hides behind normal conversations and smiling photographs. My father finally turned toward me, frustration replacing shock. "You're really going to let her do this?" he asked. "We're your parents." The sentence landed strangely. For months that word had been used like leverage, obligation instead of love. "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "You made your choices." His jaw tightened, searching for an argument that no longer existed. Around us, guests began gathering coats and purses. The carefully planned dinner dissolved into murmurs and uneasy exits. No one wanted to remain inside someone else's public collapse. Eleanor stepped beside me. "You don't need to stay," she said gently. I realized she was right. I wasn't here for revenge. I had already heard what mattered. Without another word, I turned toward the exit. The hallway outside felt cooler, calmer. Each step away from the banquet room felt lighter, as if I were setting something down piece by piece. When I opened the side room door, Ava looked up immediately, crumbs on her cheeks. "Mom, are we finished?" I knelt and wrapped my arms around her. "Yes," I whispered. "We're finished." She studied my face carefully. "You're not sad," she said. I realized she was right. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying fear or confusion, only clarity. Eleanor joined us moments later, composed as always. She didn't look back toward the banquet hall. She didn't need to. Outside, cool night air greeted us as the valet brought the car forward. City lights reflected across wet pavement, turning everything gold and silver. Ava climbed into the back seat, already sleepy. As we drove away, I watched the hotel shrink behind us. "Do you think they hate me now?" I asked quietly. Eleanor kept her eyes on the road. "People often resent consequences," she said. "That is not the same as hatred." I considered that. For so long, I had shaped myself around avoiding conflict, apologizing first, accepting blame just to keep peace. Tonight, peace came from truth instead. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother appeared. "Please call me, we need to talk." Another followed immediately. "We can fix this." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I blocked the number, not out of anger, out of understanding. Ava leaned against my shoulder from the back seat. "Are we going home?" she murmured sleepily. The question filled the car with quiet meaning. I looked at Eleanor. She gave a small nod. "Yes," I said softly, "we are." As the city lights passed outside the window, I realized something important. Walking away didn't feel like losing family. It felt like finally choosing one. And for the first time since the hallway door closed behind us months ago, I understood that some doors are meant to stay closed, so you can finally move forward without carrying the past with you. 6 months later, life became quiet in a way I once thought only existed in other people's stories. Not perfect, not effortless, just steady. Morning sunlight filled the kitchen on Silver Oak Lane, warming the wooden floor while Ava sat at the table coloring before school. Her legs swung back and forth beneath the chair as she hummed softly, completely focused on choosing the right shade of yellow for a drawing she insisted was our forever house, our kitchen. Even now, that word sometimes felt unreal. The legal process had taken time, but eventually the tenants moved out peacefully. Eleanor made certain they were treated fairly. Relocation assistance, patience, dignity. None of what happened had been their fault, and she never allowed anger to land on the wrong people. The first night Ava and I slept there alone, I barely rested. I kept expecting someone to knock on the door and tell us there had been a mistake. No one came. Now routines replaced survival. Breakfast dishes left in the sink, school papers taped crookedly to the refrigerator, shoes abandoned near the front door despite my constant reminders. Proof of living. "Mom," Ava said, holding up a drawing. "This is us." 3 stick figures stood beneath a giant sun in front of a bright yellow house. "That's you," she explained proudly. "That's me, and that's Grandma." I smiled. Eleanor visited every Sunday morning without fail, always pretending she came only to see Ava. She brought pastries, corrected my coffee-making technique, and quietly inspected the garden like she was making sure the house itself was healing. Sometimes I caught her standing on the porch watching Ava play, her expression softer than I had ever seen growing up. I returned to work at Riverside General Hospital by choice this time, not desperation. The long shifts were still exhausting, but now exhaustion ended somewhere safe. Home waited. Ava walked to school with neighborhood kids, arguing about playground games and art projects, problems small enough for a child her age. Safety had given her childhood back. As for my parents, consequences unfolded quietly. The rental money they had taken was recovered through legal action. Investigations revealed debts they had hidden for years. Without Eleanor's financial support, their carefully maintained image slowly collapsed. Invitations stopped arriving. Phone calls slowed. People who once admired them moved on politely. My mother attempted to contact me several times. New numbers, emails, even handwritten letters. None contained apologies, only explanations. I didn't respond. Healing, I learned, sometimes means refusing conversations that reopen wounds. One afternoon, while organizing paperwork, I found the original property folder Eleanor had prepared months before everything happened. Inside was a handwritten note. For Naomi and Ava, stability should never depend on permission. I sat with those words for a long time. Eleanor hadn't rescued me by controlling my life. She had simply removed the barrier someone else placed in front of it. That difference mattered. That evening, Ava and I planted flowers along the walkway. She chose every color herself. Bright pink beside yellow and purple, completely mismatched but joyful. "It looks happy," she declared. She was right. We sat on the porch eating ice cream while evening light softened the neighborhood. Wind chimes moved gently above us. "Mom," Ava asked suddenly. "Yes? Do you like our house?" I looked around, porch light glowing, laughter drifting from a nearby yard, Ava leaning safely against me. "I love it," I said. She nodded confidently. I knew we'd get one again. Kids believe in endings long before adults allow themselves to. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I walked slowly through the quiet rooms, not checking locks out of fear, just appreciating stillness. The hallway no longer reminded me of the one where a door had once closed behind us. This hallway led somewhere safe. My phone buzzed softly with a notification. Another personal story someone had shared online about surviving something impossible. I saved it to read later, remembering how stories once helped me through nights when everything felt uncertain. Sometimes hearing how someone else made it through reminds you that endings can become beginnings. And sometimes sharing your story quietly helps someone else keep going too. I turned off the kitchen light and paused at the doorway. For the first time, the house didn't feel like proof of what had been taken. It felt like proof of what endured. And as I headed upstairs, I understood something clearly. Home isn't the place people give you. It's the place that stays. Once you finally choose yourself.